Good morning. Welcome everybody to the 5th annual Women on Board's National Conversation Day. I'm Mara Babin, and for those of you who know me, you know how absolutely thrilled and delighted I am to see this room full of people who are interested in this wonderful subject. We're going to start by introducing my two co-chairs for the event. This event was possible through the collaboration of two wonderful organizations in Phoenix, Elevate and Take the Lead. And my two co-chairs are Oksana Komornitsy from Elevate, I have to do this, and Dana Saylor from Take the Lead. Thank you so much for your help. We have the raffle.
We will be raffling 2 books by our guest speaker, Shirley Weis, Playing to Win in Business, book 1 of the Just Respect for Women series. And we have 2 raffles for this. And our first winner is Erica. And our next winner is Marianne Henley Favada of Miller. Come on up. Thank you, Shirley, for the kind donations. We truly appreciate it.
And we have 2 more gifts for during later in the program, so don't go away. You may not leave empty-handed. We're going to start today with a short video from 2020 Women on Boards. Greg? And lights. Thank you. I know that was quick, so I've seen that video a couple of times now. I'd like to tell you the 4 things that were important to me from the video. You heard Michael Roth, the CEO of Interpublic Group, say that companies who do not have diversity and inclusiveness at the top do not perform as well as companies who do not perform as well. You heard Mark Lautenbach, CEO of Pitney Bowes, note the dangers of groupthink when everybody sits around the table and has the same perspective. Linda Hill, the professor of business from Harvard Business School, said, innovation requires diversity and conflict. And conflict is an interesting question because, of course, no CEO wants to open up a field of conflict without some limitations in his boardroom. And finally, you heard Denise Morrison, president and CEO of the Campbell Soup Company, find that gender diversity produces better outcomes. So, what is Women in the Boardroom about? Well, it's not just about fairness. And it's not just about a pathway for those of us who are talented, board-ready, high-performing women in this room to find our way into what has traditionally been a boys' club. Business is responsible for our wealth, for our retirement incomes, for the sustainability of our workforce, and for the competitiveness of our economy in global markets. And companies without diversity in the boardroom just don't do as well as those who do. We need to do what we can do to make companies aware of the performance data and make CEOs comfortable with the inclusion of diverse people in their boardroom. And we need to help bring to their attention women who are board ready and who want to serve and who will serve to help companies raise their game. Today we're going to give you lots of facts and actionable information about how to participate in this movement, whether you aspire personally to board service or not. This is the message we want you to take away from today's program, and we hope it inspires you the way it does us. I'd like to thank National Bank of Arizona for opening up their wonderful facility to us today. Now, you'll hear lots of information today and lots of facts. To make it easier for you to listen and not have to take lots of notes, your programs have the links to many of the things that are going to be referred to in today's program. And the videos, if you're going to see a PowerPoint from 2020 Women on Boards, If you want a copy of that PowerPoint, let us know. We'll make it available to you. Many of you have asked in your questions and in private sidebar conversations that we've had about how you could find your own pathway to the boardroom. And we're planning a program on February 29th, Leap Year Day, traditionally the only day in 4 years that women can propose marriage, to be a workshop on how to find a place in the boardroom. We thought we would use the extra day that comes once every 4 years to propose some improvements to the U.S. economy instead. If you're interested in participating in the program, you have a blue sheet, thank you, on your table. Please tick off the areas that interest you and just leave it on the table. We'll pick it up. If you want to tweet from today's program, the hashtag is hashtag 2020WOB. We've made many promises to you to be done by 1:30 today, so we're going to just move right along. I'd like to introduce next two women who are dear, dear friends of mine. Kathy Lynn Collada is the founding and current president of Elevate Arizona. And I can honestly say that 90% of the women I know in Arizona, I know because Kathy is a fabulous connector. And Gloria Felt is the co-founder of Take the Lead. Gloria has inspired me personally with Take the Lead's mission to prepare, develop, and inspire and propel women to take their fair and equal share of leadership across all sectors by 2025. So Gloria and Kathy, tell us about your organizations.
All right, is this working here? Okay. Hey, it's so great to be here today. I just can't congratulate Mara and Dana and Kathy and Oksana enough for this fabulous, fabulous event. And I am just thrilled that I'm here today to be with you. How many of you were at the Take the Lead launch last year? Fantastic, wonderful. Well, then you know the hunger right now for the kind of programs that you're here today to participate in. You know that this is a perfect storm in a good way for women right now to reach leadership parity. Our mission at Take the Lead is to make that happen by 2025, not 2095, as the World Economic Council says. So are you with us? Ready to go? Okay. All right. Our mission at Take the Lead is to prepare, develop, inspire, and propel women to take their fair and equal share of leadership positions across all sectors by 2025. And we do that through several different ways. We have a comprehensive program. We believe in collaboration. You'll see us doing almost all of our programming in collaboration with other wonderful organizations like Elevate. And we believe that it is women's relationship with power that has been that requires us to really look at that, to deal with it, and to use it as an opportunity to break through to leadership parity. That part of what's holding us back is external, and part of what's holding us back is also, we've been raised in that same culture, and so part of it is internal as well. So our training programs really deal with that and give women that breakthrough opportunity and give companies and organizations the opportunity to retain their talented women workers that so many companies are now trying to do. I am beyond thrilled to be able to tell you today about things that are happening in Arizona specifically. Take the Lead works everywhere, but because we did the launch in Arizona, we have been blessed by having Take the Lead Arizona grow up all on its own. And we have two amazing programs that will be launching next year here. We hope you'll be part of them. First, I would like to introduce some of our new Take the Lead trainers. Felicia is here. Okay, Felicia, stand up. Felicia Davis. Okay. Josie Borman. And Lori Battaglia. Did I miss anybody? Did any other of our wonderful new trainers come into the room when I didn't see you? This is how we will be able to scale up and provide Take the Lead's breakthrough training to your company, your organization. Be sure to see any of these women afterward if you want to talk with them about what they can do for you. Secondly, we're beyond thrilled that next year we will also have the opportunity to launch a special program called 50 Women Can Change the World, in which we'll be training nonprofit women emerging leaders. Because believe it or not, though women are 75% of nonprofit organization employees and volunteers, the data in terms of who's really at the top of the major, largest nonprofit organizations is exactly the same as it is across every other sector. Well, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that, and Arizona is going to lead the way in showing the rest of the country how to do it. So if you're interested in getting involved in any of these, being part of our leadership council, joining any of these programs and helping us further them, talk with any of our trainers, you've met them, and you've also met Dana and Mara, who can tell you how to get involved in anything else. I just want to say thank you again. It's such a pleasure to be here, such a thrill to be part of this amazing program with 2020 Women on Boards, because, you got to start at the top. So thanks, and over to you, Kathy.
Thank you. Okay, I'm Kathy Lynn Collada. So let me tell you just a brief bit about Elevate. So our chapter here started 4 years ago. We were affiliated at that time with 85 Broads. Some of you may know the story of 85 Broads, but essentially it was started by a woman who was an executive at Goldman Sachs who left and felt that they needed a network really to move their opportunities forward. So they named it 85 Broads because of 85 Broad Street was where Goldman Sachs was headquartered. So that's kind of the genesis behind the original company. And then we were rebranded last year as Elevate. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in is that we have a very diverse network of women that are connected to what we do. They come from corporate settings, from entrepreneurial settings. We have women with a lot of experience, and a lot of them are here in the room today. We've got a lot of others who are just starting and launching their careers, and they're also here today. So we're really pretty excited about the kinds of women that are connected to what we do. And to Mara's point earlier, we feel very, very strongly about connecting with a purpose. So one of the things that we try to do is around our programming and around other events like this is to really get to know some of the women that we're meeting and find out what it is you're trying to do and how we can help. Because there's a lot of women that we know and more that we meet every day that really have the power to help move along some of your dreams and some of your objectives. So we have a lot of things coming up in the spring. We don't have our calendar finalized, but we'll have programs really for women in the boardroom, folks that have interest in that. We have a couple other series, one called Amazing Women, where we profile women who have Arizona connections that are doing a lot to change the world. And you get a chance to hear their story and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And some other programs we're going to do around finance and investing and wealth management, things like that. So anyway, we're going to have a lot of fun things going on in the spring. We hope you'll continue to join us. And we do hope we're going to see a lot of you interested in the program where people can take their first step to move toward that board seat. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, Mara, Oksana, and Dana for all the good work you've done. And enjoy the program.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce Nicole Carroll. Nicole has an official introduction that talks about how many years she's been a journalist in Phoenix, how many people are part of her newsroom, how many award-winning journalism projects she's been a part of. But for this audience, I asked one of Nicole's team to help me introduce her. So with thanks to Megan Finnery, I'm going to give you that introduction. Nicole is a Valley leader in her dedication to her newsroom's work, highlighting social justice and investigating betrayals of public trust and misuse of public funds. I bet she has some very interesting stories. And she's a leader on a personal level. She runs a newsroom that is almost totally has almost total gender parity, which boasts women in top leadership positions, including Nicole's own job as VP News Executive Editor, most of whom you would know as Editor-in-Chief. Women on Nicole's team make decisions about what runs on the front page, what runs in the business section and in the feature section, and about how to grow the company digitally and in terms of innovation. Your Arizona Republic is a rare female-led newsroom in America today, and Nicole is a key figure in empowering, promoting, and retaining the women on her team. Please welcome Nicole Carroll.
Thank you, and thank you, Megan. That was really sweet. I'm thrilled to be here today. This is an important topic, and getting to meet all of you, this is a great day. So also thanks to Mara, Oksana, and Dana, and we will get right into our program. So 2020 Women on Boards is a national campaign, as we've talked about, to increase the percentage of women on U.S. company boards to 20% or greater by 2020. Much work has been done and much work is left to do. Women on Boards has put together some information that I'm going to share with you to guide our discussion today. So we will head into the PowerPoint. The National Conversation on Board Diversity is a national event. We're here in Phoenix, but there are actually 19 events going on in 17 cities across the U.S. with over 1,600 people attending. And participants will be tweeting all day from these events, like mentioned before, so please do join the conversation at #2020WOB. The rationale behind 2020 WOB is simple. Having women on corporate boards is good for business and good for society overall. Boards should represent stakeholders, including investors, employees, consumers, many of whom are women. And the fact is, diverse boards make better decisions. I love the part in the video when she said balance is power. Absolutely. Research shows that companies include women in the boardroom are more profitable. The 2020 Gender Diversity Index for 2015 showed that 55% of the index companies that fell off the list, the ones that were acquired, they were merged, they went out of business, those were companies with just one or no female directors. And research shows that companies with women directors are not just more profitable, they are more sustainable. The 2020 campaign goal is simple. We talked about 20% of board seats held by women. And they wish to reach a tipping point for change so that companies cannot imagine having an all-male board. I know, I can't believe that's a goal, right? That's just common sense, right? That's just the way it should be. Exactly. The cornerstone of the 2020 campaign is the 2020 Gender Diversity Directory, which I think is fascinating. It's a directory of close to 2,000 companies that are categorized by the gender diversity of their boards. So W, they're winners, 20% or greater. V, very close. T for token or one woman. And 0 for no women. So let's see how we're doing. The 2020 Gender Diversity Index is a subset of that diversity directory, and the index tracks the progress being made by the Fortune 1000 companies. The baseline year was 2010. These are the 2015 results of the Gender Diversity Index, and there's been real growth. In 2015, there are more W companies than any other category at 45%. So that's great news. Yeah, that's great news. Also good news, the number of 0 companies continues to decline to 9% this year. Still too much, but a decline, we'll take it. The Gender Diversity Index is based on the 2010 Fortune 1000 list. Every year, a few companies drop off the list because they go out of business, merge, are acquired. This year's index is based on 842 companies. In 2015, the percentage grew to 18.8% of board seats held by women, and that's up from 17.7% last year and 14.6% in 2011. For the first time, the Fortune 500 has increased to over 20%. Smaller companies saw an increase as well, which is significant, as smaller companies have been slower to put women on their boards than larger companies. And like Mara said earlier, you can download a copy of the complete Gender Diversity Index from 2020wob.com. It's a quick read, and it looks at all the national, state, and sector progress. This year, the study also looked at the 960 active companies in the 2015 Fortune 1000 list and saw similar year-over-year progress. There are 199 companies that have joined the Fortune 1000 list since 2010. Of these companies, the percentage of women on boards is only 13.5%, demonstrating once again that the smaller and newer companies are less diverse than the larger and more established companies. So what about Arizona? Arizona has 12 Fortune 1000 companies in the 2020 index. For all 12 companies to reach 20% of women on boards, AZ needs 11 more women if women replace men, and 14 more women if seats are added. In the absence of a national policy, state and local governments have moved to address board inequality by proposing and passing limited resolutions about gender diversity. You can see some of them here. So Women on Boards encourage you to support the campaign. You can learn about the issue, how many women serve on boards or in senior management in the companies where you work, invest and do business. So get informed. The other news to share is that this is the first year that 2020 WOB is participating in Giving Tuesday, which is Tuesday, December 1st. I love Giving Tuesday, so it's great to have them be a part of that. So with that background, we will jump right into some of the conversation. We're fortunate to have some great experts in our community, and let me introduce two of them to you. Amy Hillman is the Dean of Arizona State University, W.P. Carey School of Business. Her areas of interest include corporate political strategies, boards of directors, and corporate strategy. She serves on the board of publicly traded CDK Global and on the nonprofit boards of the ASU Research Park and CAPS Research. Welcome, Amy Hillman. There's Amy. Shirley Weis is an author, consultant, and a director. She was formerly Chief Administrative Officer of the Mayo Clinic system, where she had responsibility for overseeing Mayo's $9 billion operations and 60,000 employees. I told her I can't imagine. She is the author of Playing to Win in Business and a director of Century Insurance and RTI Surgical. So please also welcome Shirley Weis. Okay, so we're going to get right into some questions, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. So in the video, you heard Michael Roth say that companies that don't have diversity and inclusiveness in the boardroom don't perform as well as those who do. And that's really key, isn't it? So Amy, can you talk about what research says about the performance of companies who have achieved diversity at the top as compared to those who haven't?
Yeah, there's very clear evidence out there to support that statement. There's very little ambiguity around that overall. And what I will say is I like the new rating system of the winners and the almost there. But what research does show is that having one woman is certainly better than having no women. And so while we might consider that a token situation, we actually see an improvement in performance just by having one woman on the board. And then once you get up to the winners level, that 20%, you see another dramatic increase. And so just by having a female sit there in the board, they will participate. A boardroom is not an environment where someone will stay quiet, and we are seeing performance effects.
Excellent. So Shirley, can you talk a little bit about what diversity means and how having a diverse board helped creative problem solving?
I think diversity is lots of things, and certainly we're talking today about the gender diversity, but it's more than that. And I think as we look at the people in the room here today, I know many of you from very different backgrounds, so I think it's understanding not only the gender portion, but where we come in terms of part of the country. I always ask for people where they are from because it tells you a lot about what your experiences have been and how you see the world. Your professional backgrounds, particularly depend on what kind of board you want to be on and the kind of expertise you have as you're looking to make a move on to a board. I think that nowadays with all the things that are happening, I was talking to some folks from one of the universities who are working on security, cybersecurity, those sorts of things, hot topic in the boardroom, and anyone with those kind of backgrounds, you should be in good position for possible board seats. And certainly just understanding that everyone brings a different perspective. And I think also age differences, and I have a little note here, I'm not as good with stats as Amy is probably, but I was reading about the CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, $294 billion that they're overseeing in terms of retirement programs. And they're trying to get their board to change because they feel like they have board stagnation. They've had the same people on the board for years and trying to get younger people, people with some different backgrounds. And I think that's the sort of thing that continues to be a challenge, is making sure that people have a chance to have new faces and new points of view in the boardroom.
I think that's a good point. I also love that point in the video when she talked about creative abrasion. I'm going to take that phrase with me, and I think diversity fosters that in a good way. So thank you for that. Let's turn to excellence in governance. It's been said that the dearth of women CEOs is one explanation for the absence of women in the boardroom. Research by Heydrich and Struggles suggests there is no evidence that CEOs make the best directors. So what do you think about this? And maybe each of you could take that.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think that the research, that was a common thought because when you looked at boards, you saw other CEOs. And so then you started to connect the dots and say, well, there's not very many female CEOs, so therefore that's the problem. And CEOs really don't make great directors because they're really busy. and they really should be focused on their own firm. And then let's also talk about that creative abrasion. And the professor on the video said that conflict was necessary. And when you're a sitting CEO, not only are you busy, but you really don't want your board messing with your business very much. And so we actually observe in the research that sitting CEOs tend to be more ingratiating in their behavior in a boardroom and have less conflict, less meaningful dialogue, because they don't want to go against the CEO, because they don't want a board member going against them on their own firm.
Interesting. Shirley.
I think the other part of it is that research shows that about 75% of the people who go on boards are people who know each other. And so that whole good old boy network of populating the board with people that you know, and you know other CEOs, you know other people from other organizations. So I think that you're finding, again, 25% are not from that network. And I think many of the very progressive boards are now using board recruiters a little more than they have in the past, and trying to reach out and have a broader net. For me, even though I was the chief operating officer for a $10 billion corporation, I had a hard time getting the first corporate board because I wasn't a CEO. And I think the title doesn't mean anything. As you said, many CEOs are very busy and don't have the time to put into the boards. Boards require a lot of effort these days. There's lots of issues that come up in between meetings, and it's hard for a sitting CEO to drop everything and then spend time with the board where they have a fiduciary responsibility.
Well, let's dig a little deeper on that. How do we get CEOs more comfortable with non-traditional candidates? How important is operating experience for women who want to serve? And what areas, government, accounting, law, are good paths to the boardroom?
I think, as I mentioned before, there's some topics that are hot topics right now for boards. Doesn't mean you change your profession midstream, but I do think that one of the things that's very important is that you're an expert in something. So whatever it is that you are doing in your career, become very, very good in a particular area, not to be so narrow that you can't reach out and help others. But when you look at the different industries, folks are looking for different kinds of expertise. CFO is always a very popular position. If they can't get the CEO, they often will ask for the CFO. So if you're in finance, that's a good position. I find that as I mentor young women, I'm always encouraging them to be sure to get some operational experience, because a board is looking to see, do you have the broader view? Do you understand the entire picture of the business, of the industry that you're in? So I think those are two tips I would offer.
I had done a piece of research a few years ago, and so let me just explain it for a minute, not too long because it'll put you all to sleep. But what we did is we looked at women and ethnic minorities that joined Fortune 1000 boards, and how did they differ from the white men on those boards. And we found, sadly, that women and ethnic minorities that join boards are much more highly educated than the white men there. So there's a badge of some stamp of approval if you have a master's degree or a terminal degree of some sort. And so I'd also put in a plug for education. And then to your point, what we also found was that a large number of those women and minorities who were joining boards were coming out of the legal profession, particularly managing partners of big law firms, or they were coming out of the accounting firms, the banking firms. Some were coming from more what we would call community influential, so not-for-profits than the white males, but they certainly weren't coming out of kind of the mainstream business functions. And I don't think that's changed a lot today.
So Amy, I want to go back to something you said. You had mentioned that one is better than none. But I have read that the number of women in the boardroom itself is important. So what do you think the right number of women is to be present is needed to be effective? And is there something wrong with one and done?
I do. I mean, I want to try to be excited about progress. So having one is great. I just don't like the and done part about it. And so I think as you think about what a board should be composed of, I always think about it as a matrix. So what are the different types of skills and experiences that are relevant for this firm in this industry? What are the types of consumers that we're trying to reach, or what are we trying to get at? And then try to think about how do you check things off these lists with directors. But you can't check gender diversity off completely. So I'm optimistic that we're going to get to 50%. We need to be reflective of society. And I think that there's a very rare case to argue the opposite. So I saw in the statistics this morning that were put out by NACD that one of the real laggards on women on boards is the technology industries. That's the worst among bad. And so there again, you've got sectors, that and the mining, the basic industries, where you really have much less representation. So I think you want to get as close as you can to reflecting society. I think having that 20% is a great one. If you get to a third, if you get to something higher than that, you're really doing well. And I think you're among rare company. And that's, it's making progress. It's just, as the video said, so much slower than we'd all want.
Right. And we're absolutely going to get to those tech companies next. But first, Shirley, any thoughts on the appropriate makeup of the boards?
Well, I think there's an old saying that 1 is a token, and 2 is a click, and 3, maybe you can have a conversation. And I find that to be true. I'm on 2 boards right now, and I'm the only woman on one, and there's 3 women on the other one. And it's a wonderful problem when you go to the restroom and you have to wait in line in the women's restroom. So, in fact, the other 2 women were saying, oh, now there's 3 of us, shucks, we have to wait. But I do think many of you have been the only woman, I'm sure, as you look at your career, and it's very lonely. I found one of the strategies I use to try to combat that is to look at the men around the table and see if there's someone that would be of a similar point of view on a topic, so I can build my own little coalition if need be. But it's tough sometimes to be the only one. I do think that, as you said, there's progress being made, but often what you see is there's 1 or 2, and when they go off, they just get replaced. They're not growing the numbers necessarily. And probably one of the saddest things I see right now is a lot of women who've gone to the highest levels in the C-suite, and as they were retiring, we're being replaced by men again. And so all of you young folks, we want to make sure that you're ready, that we're here to help you and to coach and to mentor so you're able to get to those positions, because you really have to have a career body of work, I think, to make it to the boardrooms.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to put in a quick plug here for the Arizona Republic. Our new publisher of 1 month is Mia Parrish. And so we're very thrilled to have a female at the top of our company. So
Wonderful.
Okay, back to the program. Okay, so you had mentioned tech companies, and I want to talk about that. The gender diversity survey shows that smaller companies are doing less well than larger companies in achieving board diversity. But tech companies, private and public, do even worse. Get this, only 22% of technology companies, 22% have even 1 woman on their boards. So to address that issue, Silicon Valley entrepreneur Sukhinder Cassidy launched a new company whose mission is to bring women into the boardrooms of technology companies. It's called Boardlist. Sukhinder couldn't be here with us today, but she did make a special video for our event, which we'll show right now.
Hi, I'm Sukhinder Cassidy. I'm founder and CEO of a company here in the Valley called Joyous, and also founder of a new initiative called Boardlist. So we've all heard a lot about 2 different issues. Number 1, the lack of gender diversity in tech, and number 2, the lack of women on corporate boards. Well, these 2 issues are converging right here in Silicon Valley. And for us, the real question is, why are there so few women in boardrooms in general, and private company boardrooms in particular? It looks that somewhere around 20 to 22% of private tech boards have a woman on them. At the Boardlist, we decided to dive headlong into the issue of women in private tech boards and see if we could provide an effective solution. So I launched the Boardlist in July 2015, really looking at creating a marketplace where great women leaders can serve on tech company boards. We realized that it's not really a lack of qualified candidates, but there is in fact a pipeline problem. And the Boardlist is trying to uniquely solve that problem through the use of both community and technology. So how does the Boardlist work? Well, actually, it takes something that today is a very ad hoc, often opaque and informal process, and tries to help really solve one key piece of the equation, which is the discovery of great women inside of our networks and really surfacing them so they can be connected with great board opportunity. On the other hand, the women who are nominated have access to board opportunities and the ability to tell us what they like and and what they would be interested in, as well as the things in their own background that make them a great board member. Lastly, of course, the opportunity to have access to tremendous supply of great board candidates brings, in turn, great board opportunity. Whether you're someone who has a great woman to nominate, whether you're a candidate seeking your first board opportunity, or whether you're someone who's thinking about the next person to add to your board to realize its ultimate performance, we'd love to hear from you at the Boardlist, or to visit us at www.theboardlist.com.
Great. I'm glad they're using technology to identify new directors. And so for Amy and Shirley, in your experience, how do companies actually identify new directors now?
Well, I think I mentioned the stats are 75% of it is word of mouth and people who know people. For me, I found both of my boards through board recruiters. And I know there's probably several board recruiters. Anybody in the audience that's a board recruiter? Oh, I thought we had a couple here today. But for me, as I said, when I left my role, everyone said, oh, you should have all kinds of board opportunities. You know, with the work you've been doing, don't worry about it. But I found that people weren't calling. And so I had always had a practice of talking with recruiters whenever they call, and I would encourage you to do that. Just make a point of having friends in the recruitment business, because you never know when you will need them for active position as a working person, but also they tend to have either themselves or partners that are doing board searches. And in both cases, the boards I got on were because I had gotten to know these women over the years. One of them had tried to put me on a board that seemed like a stretch. It wasn't quite a good fit for me, and so we just agreed to stay in touch. And I made a point of going to visit with her in Florida and just kind of kept that going. The other board position I got because the recruiter had a colleague that I had worked with a search I had done in my organization. And again, it was two women who had done their own networking to help get on the board. But again, most of the board positions are people knowing other people, and even with high-powered board members from the board I had been on at Mayo Clinic, reaching out and helping me, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, I got my board seat because someone I knew was chair, and knew enough about me to say this is someone who should come in, and I think that's the real challenge, and it does happen that way for a lot of boards. And then I think it's referral. I think that is terrific, that board list, because in my industry, we have about 12% female business school deans. So we're in pretty rare company, and we do it the old-fashioned way, and that's an Excel spreadsheet. But we share a list amongst all of us of rising stars in our organization, and then every time a search agency contacts one of us, we say, thank you so much for asking. I'm not interested in leaving, but here are 4 women that would be terrific. And so I think just having the ability to combine networks to identify potential women is so important. I'm chairing the Nominating Governance Committee on this board now, and I was interested because the same chair who gave me this opportunity put me in that role. And I talked to him a couple of days ago, and he says, you know, we probably should add another director next year. And I said, great, let's make sure it's a woman. Yes. That's what you want to hear, right? I mean, it doesn't even take, you know, the chair of non-gov in some enlightened organizations. And I was thinking about Shirley. Actually, I'm the only woman on this board, and all the men make note of the fact that I go to the restroom alone. And so when you were sharing that anecdote, but for me, my little group, if you want to call it that, are the 2 other minorities on the board. And so we have similarities.
So you talked about your paths to the board, and you started to go there a little bit, but what should companies be doing to recruit diverse boards? You talked about what does happen, what should be happening?
I think Amy's point of being the chair of the nominating committee is one thing, is to have people of diversity in those positions. And I'm looking forward to being on my boards long enough that I can make my way to have that kind of position, because I do think that we tend to throw a wider net, whether it's the old process of just who do you know, or even asking to have a search firm used in the search. I think people say, well, there's no one out there, and usually the answer is because you haven't looked very hard. you haven't really been searching for that kind of a group. And that's human nature. I think, we understand Psychology 101. We'd like to be with people that are like us and think like us. And we heard the dangers of groupthink. So I think the more women become chairs of boards and chairs of the nominating and governance committees, that's a method. I think also there still are some women that are queen bees that like being the only woman in a setting. And I think, for me personally, I like to turn around and try to help others. And as you said, if there's something that comes my way that doesn't look like a good fit for me, I try to find someone who either would be personally possible for that position or may know someone in that industry or with that kind of a background, because I think we have to help each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we have the natural inclination to try to cast a wider net, and obviously all of you are here to try to help each other and to be helped by others. But I think we do have to worry about the queen bee. That's a good analogy. I think that it's very hard to defend not using search firms for publicly traded boards these days. I think with the pressure that comes from ISS and some of the other governance rating agencies, that it's going to be much more difficult to say it's just about who we know. And I think there again, if you think about a board as a matrix of different qualities, different age groups, different ethnicities, different nationalities, whatever it might be, and you can say to a recruiter, here's all the things that we'd like, now go optimize on this. The other thing that we've seen work in sports, and I'm not really sure that this would work for us, but I'm going to throw it out there, is we've actually had a number of sports leagues say we're not interviewing anyone for any job unless there's at least one diverse candidate in that set. And so it may be that we can start to direct search firms to say, along some of these other diversity dimensions, we got to have at least one candidate in the set that you identify. And make sure that that's a priority, because we have priorities right now for financial experts because of Sarbanes-Oxley. And so we're very comfortable going to a search firm and saying we got to have a financial expert that we have to have. So boards have to be able to say we have to have a woman, we have to have X, and not be afraid to do that.
Excellent.
And I just had one little piece on that, because you asked even the tech companies, we were talking about why there aren't more women, and part of it is because some of these boards are quite small. And I think some of the small startup companies will only have a handful of people, and if they have private equity investors, they have 2 or 3 seats, and then they've got 2 or 3 people that have been there for a while. So I think that's where it gets hard too, is when there's stagnation, there's not a lot of turnover. But any of you in the finance field, go for it, because women that are finance experts, and not just financially literate by definition, financial experts, everybody's looking for them either to be on the audit committee or to chair the audit committee, and that's a very popular field.
Well, I'm going to ask you to keep going on that, Shirley. What would you advise women who look forward to corporate board service someday to be focusing on right now well in advance?
Well, I think since it is still realistically 75% of the board seats are filled through networking to network. And I was on a lot of not-for-profit boards for years and years. And I think to build that network in the community, often you'll meet people who know people that way. I think it's also important to have those kind of positions to really understand how boards work and to be part of committees and really understand how it all comes together in that regard. I think also to be educated, and you have the wonderful groups that are represented here today. One other group I have been very active with is Women in the Boardroom. They do a lot of educational programs for women who'd like to get on board. So I think there's a number of places, but to build your network, to make sure you are an expert in something, and to define that. It's really kind of managing your personal brand too, to get that 1 or 2 minute speech about who am I, what do I do well. And then, in some ways, do your homework. There's a lot of stuff on the web these days. You can see where the holes are, which boards are missing women, and you don't want to go and call the CEO or the chair of the board necessarily and say, "Hi, here I am." But you may look to see who knows who. Is there someone that has a relationship that can make some introductions, and just continue to really reach out.
Amy?
Yeah, I think that the network is important, and I think we don't often as women say what we want, and so tell people you want to get on a board. And if that's what you really want to do, then say that's what you want to do, and make sure that everyone you know who is on a board knows you want to get on a board. For me, I've heard for years that the not-for-profit path is a good way to a board seat. The one that I think is overlooked is a private, for-profit company's board. And there are a lot of opportunities, especially in a market like Phoenix, where we have a lot of firms between the 10 million and 100 million that are private firms that have advisory boards. And it's great because it's a non-fiduciary board. You can't get sued as a result of being on that board, but you are there in an advisory capacity. And I think that that also is something that can really lead to a publicly traded board if that's what you're after.
That's great advice on what women can do to get on boards. Can you give some advice to this group on what this group can do to support the campaign of getting more women on boards?
Sure. Get out your pens and pencils. It's going to be a long list. I mean, one is look at your own organization. And, you know, I think it's very powerful when people inside the organization say, hey, you know, I happen to notice that there are no women on our board. Does that mean I have limited opportunities here? It's a zinger of a question. Because that CEO is going to hear about it at some point, even if you didn't ask it of the CEO. And I think, you know, the more pressure that we can put on organizations, the better. I mean, that's also one of the benefits of having women on boards is that it says to the women inside the organization that you have opportunity. And so I think that's really, you have to start at home and look at your organization and push for it. And then I think using something like this electronic networking to say, you know, I really do want to get out there. I know someone who wants to get out there and really start to refer people. I think that's very powerful. Education is important too. There are a lot of training programs. I mean, you all just talked about the ones that are coming up here in the Phoenix area about how to prepare yourself. And I think pointing to some of those credentials is a good thing when boards are taking a shot at someone who hasn't served on a board before.
And I think the other piece is, I was talking about the women supporting other women, and I think even internally in the organizations you're in today, to support each other, sometimes I still see women kind of picking at each other, so that whether it's the next promotion internally or maybe having someone from the company represent the organization at an outside board or whatever, people don't tend to think of the woman because we kind of pick at each other. And I think that's got to stop. I mean, it really is something that it pulls us down. It diminishes all of us. So I think to be able to say, yeah, she'd be a great candidate for that, or even to help to promote other women in that regard. So if you know something's happening, as I said, internally, maybe they need a rep for the United Way board, or you have a community group that you're involved with, to help promote the other women who are interested. And as Amy said, make people know you're aware and that you're interested. Because the other thing I find happening is, having been at some of the meetings of the C-suite, we'll be talking about who should represent us or what group would we want to have this person on, and folks will say, oh, but she's too busy. She has a family and she's so busy, so let's go with the guy. And I think just to be able to put it out there that I am interested in making a go of it, and I think just to make that awareness is very, very important. And then within the groups you do get on in terms of boards and outside activities, again, supporting each other and kind of telling people this is a good person. I really enjoy working with her. I think you'd find her a real pleasure to be on the board.
That's great advice on the whole she's too busy conversation. I find myself saying, that's her decision, not ours. Right. That just shuts that right down. That's her decision. Okay, thank you.
That's right.
Yes. Did you have a question?
Right here. Can I add something?
Please.
Okay, hi. Carey School of Business. I'm Take the Lead and Elevate, and I'm grateful you're here today because this is such an important topic. I just want to make a recommendation because sometimes women have to negotiate. I think negotiation is part of the process, and we're used to just doing and not thinking of the negotiation process. I've been in a position where I was pulled in to help with something, and I realized sometimes I have to pull back because you can do too much and not get any credit for it, and not have the power or authority to do it. So I made a deal with them. I said, or set limits on how much we volunteer and do to organizations without doing more than we need to do by adding our powers.
That's a great point.
Thank you for that. Well, let's keep going with the audience. We do have some times for questions from the audience. Did Megan leave? Is Megan still here? Okay. Megan Finnerty was our first question, but I think she had an appointment she had to go to. So we're going to go to Karen Mendenhall. Karen, can you ask the first question? We have a microphone coming to you. Oh, or you can come to the microphone, either way.
Thanks for being here. I have a question for you about decision making. So would you please share with us an example from your board service where your unique perspective helped change the course of a decision being made on one of the boards you serve?
I'd like to share one that just happened recently, and this was the board that is a medical device and medical biologics company, and I'm the only one on the board. I'm also the only one that really does much in direct health care, and so they've had a sales model where they do a lot with distributors and where they work with independent physicians, particularly surgeons that have independent surgery centers and such. And because of my background, I think the reason I was added, they wanted to have some more kind of real-time healthcare experience. But the sales guys were all up giving us a briefing about how they're still reaching out to these independent physicians and they expect to be able to do this much sales or that much sales. And I just said, first of all, do you realize how many of these independent physicians won't be here 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road? They're all getting bought up, and maybe there'll still be a few independents, but not as many as before. And the other thing the sales guys would say is they were talking about, guys, we're going to deal with the docs. And it was all male. And I finally, after about 2 hours of this, I said, are there any women salespeople or women doctors that you're dealing with? And I said it nicely, so I didn't get too much of a negative. But I found with both those conversations, even now, 2 board meetings later, people will come up and go, thank you for bringing it up, because we were thinking that this sales model of working with an independent physician was going to be something that would last forever. And then there are more women, and this is just one of those things you find. Have any of you come into a meeting where all the guys are meeting and they're all stretched out and they're pontificating? And you walk in and it's like, oh shit, there's a woman here now, because we have to act differently. And that's what I found is that it wasn't that they're even being rude, as you said, they hadn't even thought about it. They hadn't even looked at the composition. They hadn't even realized they were saying guys, the men, until you brought it up. And I found that they've made some changes in their behavior. So I felt that those were both wins.
So I sit on a technology company board, but it serves the automobile dealer industry. So talk about an old male environment. And we were having a debate about Tesla and how Tesla is selling straight to consumers. And this is a global company. And in the UK, BMW is now committed to selling any model in any configuration made over the internet straight to the consumer. And so the men in the room said, nope, dealerships, they're not going to go out of business in our lifetime. I said, really? Are you sure? And they said, yeah. And so I started to explain some of the things, why I thought that would be happening. And they just said, no, we're so not buying your argument. And I finally said, women hate shopping for cars because they're always going to try to get one over on us. And for any of us, especially those of you who have grown up with the internet and shopping for prices and transparency and equal dealing, etc., I said I would buy a car over the internet tomorrow. And most women are able to buy their own cars now. And it is a funny thing because to their credit, this was just the board in the room, they really just saw the industry the way the industry had always been, and because they're all male consumers of cars, they didn't find anything wrong with the way the industry has always been. So it definitely changed the nature of that discussion, and now we're talking a lot more about direct-to-consumer marketing. So.
Great question, great answer. So next up is Josie Borman.
Hello. Oh, fancy. Hello. Before coming here, I wanted to look at some research, and I found some data points from early 2014 that said countries like Finland, Sweden, and Norway are leading the charge with the largest percentage of women on boards, Norway being at 40%. The Catalyst.com says that the United States comes in at about 16.9%, hence the wanting to get to 20%. I'm wondering what the data is not telling us about why women aren't on boards more, why the percentage isn't higher in the United States. I know we talk a lot about how to do it, how to get on boards, what does it mean to be on a board, and things like that, but why aren't more women on boards in the United States compared to those European countries?
I think the dirty little truth for all of us is that in order to be, whether it's in the C-suite or be on boards, there's lots of things you have to give up. There's lots of things you have to do to make that happen. And I find that a lot of women I talk with aren't willing to play the game, aren't willing to do the things they need to do to play that particular game. And my book, not to be a plug, but Playing to Win in Business was about the fact that we're all playing games all day long. And so in order to make it to the next level in your organization, in order to make it to the kind of level and the kind of broad experience, there's a lot that has to be given up. And I have a dear friend here that was part of the Women's Tennis Association back in the days when Virginia Slims sponsored the Women's Tennis Association with the slogan, "You've come a long way, baby." And we've come a long way, but we also have more choices now too. And so the fastest growing segment of new business owners in the country are baby boomer women who said, "I've had enough of corporate America, I'm going to do my own thing." And so I think that that's part of it, is that in order to play this game we've talked about, where we want to have CEOs, we want to have the buddies we know from golf or wherever, sometimes women just choose not to go that path and decide to spend their time and energy elsewhere. So I think everyone figures that out for themselves. And in order to play the game, for the people I've known, and as you look at these top women that you see talked about with Sheryl Sandbergs and Marissa Myers and all the folks around the world, you know, they also have worked it out of what their family life looks like. And in some cases, the hubby has decided to stay home, and the woman has decided to have the bigger career outside the home. Some cases, they decide not to have any children at all. But as I coach 30-year-old women who are trying to figure out how to have it all, I've had several in my office crying because they're trying to figure out how they have now just got an MBA. They're just in the early part of being successful in their career, and how are they going to do it all and still have a family and not feel like they're short shrifting one or the other. So I think that's part of it, and that doesn't mean that they don't have babies in Norway by any means. but I think that there's a different social support network in some of the Scandinavian countries. So I'd be interested in the research that you'll probably have.
Yeah, so you know, those countries in particular are very egalitarian. You know, they've had very progressive family leave for both men and women for years. They have an incredible social safety net in terms of how child care can occur when you're a working female. And then the other reason why they've made such dramatic progress of lately is they have quotas. And so they have legally mandated quotas. Now, what I find fascinating is now Spain and Italy have adopted quotas. And I'm thinking, wow, I mean, those countries couldn't be more non-egalitarian. They couldn't be more masculine, macho. I mean, how is this going to work there? And one of the things that I find so interesting is to think about our own situation and to say, would we ever have a national or federal law that created quotas like you're seeing some of the states do? And I was on this for a while, I thought, oh, this is the answer. And then I realized we don't even have equal representation or close to it in Congress. So if we don't have it in Congress, how would we ever get a law passed that says companies should have it? And ironically, a lot of
these countries that have been adopting quotas have quotas for their governing bodies as well. So you have to have elected politicians that reflect the society there, and so they have quotas.
That's great. And Kathy Sachs is up next, and she's got a question that's going to continue on this same train of thought here.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, it's actually a really great segue to my question. It's like it was planned or something. I'm really glad to be here and really so pleased to see the number of people that are here for this conversation. Thanks for your contribution and leading this discussion and the research. I come from tech and I sit on 3 boards and I am the only female. And when I look back at my career, at every table that I've sat, I've always been the only female. I used to be the youngest, but I don't think I'm not that anymore. And so I used to kind of view it as like somewhat of a privilege, like I'm the one that made it, right? I'm the fierce one that has what it takes. And now at the point in my career, I'm just annoyed, pissed off, and I want to fuel that energy into creating abundance. You know, the idea that you said around scarcity, there is room for all of us to contribute. There's room for all of us. So my question is around how to build more traction and accelerate progress. And the specifics of my question are around how to reframe, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, how do we reframe the movement such that it's not a, we are here to replace white men, which it kind of is. How do we reframe it in a way that we can accelerate traction because the majority of the decision makers who are making a move for inclusion are white males. And part of it's generational to wait for them to die off, but as well, like there needs to be a reframing. And I'm really interested in that to make it something that comes out of the women box and into the how you do business box.
You said a number of very interesting things. And one thing I would like to add, you talked about them dying off, and I'm not sure it's all the men dying, the old men dying off. Because frankly, I find some of the men that are most sensitive to this topic are the men who have daughters who are now in the workplace. Because when their daughters come to work and come home and tell the stories about how badly they've been treated, those are the folks I think that have really made a big difference. And I really put it into the category of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I find the good guys, and we all know good guys. I mean, most of our mentors probably have been good guys who see in us our potential. Every mentor I had was a guy, I mean, because that's all there were. So I think that there's the good guys that see it, understand it, and really are looking at us for what we bring to the table, and that's what the conversation has to be about. It's not male or female or ethnic background as much as what we bring. There's kind of the bad guys, and those are folks that maybe just don't get it. They never looked at the table to know that there were all guys in the first place necessarily. And there's the ugly. And I did bring this stick because I don't want to miss this one. But let's see here. So the Pricewaterhouse study of public corporation directors, 35% of men and 63% of women think that having a woman on the board is very important. 35% of men, 63% of women. And fewer than 1% of the Fortune 500 corp boards have achieved the gender parity that we're talking about. But I'm a realist, and the older I get, the more of a realist I am. And there's some men that just don't want us there. And I use the analogy of, oh, a woman's here now. And I try not to spend my time with those kind of people. And we haven't talked about, if you have an offer for a board, to be careful about which ones you accept, because you want to have a board experience where it's people that you enjoy spending time with, because you're probably going to be with them for 10 years. And you're going to be through ups and downs and good and bad of the organization. So I think that the more we can get to what is in our brains, what we bring to the table, and get away from all these other external things, the better. And your point about having been the youngest and now still only the only woman, I think helping to bring those other women forward, as I mentioned before, to help pull others up is very important.
We also, a way to kind of shift that away from replacing someone who they like and have been working with for someone that they, see as an outsider, would be to grow the board. And so boards used to be a lot bigger than they are today. We know that large groups tend to be
hard to manage and dysfunctional. So I'm not saying go big again, go huge. But after Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, we have shrunk corporate boards down to 7 or 8 now, and there's certainly room to go to 9 without going crazy in terms of dysfunctional groups. And so what I've also found is saying, look, it's time to add a female or add whatever type of diversity you're looking for. And then the question becomes when another director either retires or comes off because of term limits, do we actually replace that person, or are we okay? And so you don't have to actually get someone to leave before you can get someone new to come on board. I will say I get to deal with a lot of the ugly. I'm blessed with the opportunity. And, you know, when you're in an industry that is dominated by men, such as mine, I was with someone the other day who said, oh, you know, I said, who's on the board of your company these days? And they said, oh, we're up to 12. And I said, gee, you know, that's too big. We know that you can't do good things with 12 around the table. And he said, well, we needed to go to 12 because we needed to add some ladies. So, you know, you want to be aware of those boards. And I thought Shirley's comment was a good one. Even if you know you want to be a director and you think you have things to add, you don't jump at that first one unless it's going to be a good fit, because the last thing you want to do is join a board and be treated like a token, even if you're one of 3. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
And one other thing that Amy prompted is just, I think the issue of age limits is important too. And one of the things that you see now is some of the good corporate governance talks about 70, 72-ish. But I see people trying to push back on it because once you get comfortable on the board, people like the money. And for a lot of the folks, you know, this is their big social club too. That this is kind of the way they are able to feel like they still have a hand in the game. So another thing is maybe at the governance level looking at some term limits that do require you to let people rotate off, because after 10 years or so, 10, 12 years, it's time. And I think that makes some openings.
Great thoughts. Just to keep it going, Patrice, register. Where's Patrice? Okay. Okay.
How do you prime yourself to become a candidate for a board seat? And her real question is, are there specific training programs and or networks to become involved with?
well, I think we talked a little bit about some of the training opportunities that you can take advantage of. I think it's also important to talk to people who are on boards and treat it more as an informational kind of interview, find out what it's like, find out what the expectations are so that you have a better insight, because most of us have never been inside of a boardroom until we have to go inside of a boardroom and then stay there for some reason. So I think having a realistic preview of what that is part of it, putting yourself out there and saying that that's what you want as a part of it. There are some very good training programs, and actually have started to be seeds for potential female and minority directors at some of the big universities, not ASU, but up at Northwestern, at the Kellogg School, and at Stanford, they've got some pretty nice director training. Now it's pricey, but it comes with a certification that you've invested in yourself enough and that you know enough about what's going to be expected.
I think those programs are good too, because you do meet other people, that again, the networking piece. But how many are on boards of some sort right now? Is everybody on something? School board, PTA board, Girl Scout board, whatever. If you're interested, again, I think you need that experience, because it also will help you understand if this is something you really want to do. Because I think there's almost like a sense now to be the full corporate woman exec, you have to be on a board. And it's not all it's cracked up to be necessarily. I mean, there's a part of it that's very, very educational, very stimulating. But if you get on a bad board, it can be awful. If you get on a board of a company that's having trouble, maybe there's a CEO issue, or you're having problems with the product itself, or God forbid now with cybersecurity, everybody's at risk for that. It can be very time consuming, and you can get sued. So I think there is something that needs to be thought about as you go into this. As Amy said, advisory boards are a little safer to get a flavor for it. Usually community boards are a little safer too, although again, you can have a community board that you're on where they're having troubles too. And I think a lot of the not-for-profit boards are looking for you also in many ways to either donate your dollars or your talents. So you have to keep that in mind. But I think really understand who you are, what you want, what you're trying to accomplish. Many people get on boards because it's a mission for them, that this is something that the board is doing that really matters to them. And so I think that's another consideration to keep in mind.
Great, and I'm going to skip a little bit out of order and ask Sherry Derryberry to give your question. Where's Sherry? Because it plays completely off what you're saying, Shirley, and I think it'll keep that conversation going.
You touched on this a little bit. I'm just curious about the progression of board involvement and development. Do you start off with an advisory board and then you kind of graduate to a paid position on a board?
I think it's all over the map. So I think you can start with a not-for-profit board and go straight to a publicly traded board. You can start for a private for-profit firm, and those advisory board members are typically paid. So that's the other nice thing about those boards. And then you go into not a big publicly traded one, or you can go straight in. I think it depends on you, your network, and your mastery, to Shirley's earlier point about what is it that you're really good at. And, is that something that's more suited to kind of a laddering of boards, or are you going to go in somewhere and then ladder from there?
And sometimes you get a board seat by virtue of the position you have in your corporation. When I was at Mayo Clinic, I was a board member because I was a vice president, and that was kind of a dual thing. You had the fiduciary responsibility of being on the corporate board, but also your day-to-day operational issues. And there are two different roles. That's the other thing to keep in mind. As a board member, I always tell people it's like being a grandparent versus when you're in an operational role where you are responsible for everything day in and day out. And you have to be very careful and use good judgment about when you choose to make a comment or make an intervention in the way that they're running the organization.
Great. And I think we've got time for about one more audience question. And I'm going to skip around again to Dina Patton, because, again, I think it's a good call to action, a good ending question from the audience that follows this train of thought.
All right. So we've been talking about the networking and the boardlist.com, but what would you say are the top ways to get ourselves known to companies looking for women on their board? But I also want to just add a little bit to that. My entire mission is women and girls, and I have very specific values I'm looking for in companies that I'm going to possibly be on their board. So not only that they're looking for women, but when you see maybe a company or two that you're really inspired by, what's the appropriate way to approach them, right? How do you start that conversation if I'm really drawn to a specific company that I want to be on their board one day? How would you approach that?
Well, I think maybe I'll take the latter part, probably. Maybe Amy does the first part. But, I never found anybody who isn't thrilled to tell you about what they're doing. And we talked about even reaching out to say, I'd like to learn more about your organization. Now, whether you go to the CEO right away or you meet other people that are part of your organization. But if you see something you really like, I think reach out and ask if there's someone that would be willing to tell you about it, give you a tour, especially if you're interested in spending some time, if you'd be willing to volunteer to help them with whatever that portion might be. I think people are generally pretty generous with what they will give you if they feel like you have a legitimate and honest interest in what they're accomplishing and trying to do there.
Yeah, I agree. I think reaching out to directors of that company as well, again with the idea that I am so passionate about women and girls and I see what your company is doing. Can you tell me a little bit about how as a board member you have influence over that? And I think you will get a lot of good responses, especially if you can connect to that passion that you have in the organization.
Right.
And I forgot the first part of the question.
The top ways to get ourselves known to companies looking for women on the board. So similar to the video, boardlist.com, but is there anything here locally that we might be missing or wasn't mentioned today that is really connecting women with those boards that are looking for women?
We talked before, and we've got the right people in this room. We talked about one of the things that they're doing with women corporate directors in another part of the country is something called speed dating, where they've gotten the chairs of boards and the CEOs to come to an event where women are available, and you go, change conversations every 15 minutes or whatever to get some introductions done and to get to know each other. The other thing we haven't talked about is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I've had many people reach out to me. A lot of college kids will find me. One enterprising young man wanted a job at one of the companies I am on the board for, and so he found me, and we had a conversation. I got him a courtesy interview. I told him I couldn't give him a job, but I think LinkedIn is a wonderful tool, and I hope that we'll all link after this event because there's amazing if you use that tool to its fullest. You can find people all over the world that have an interest and are doing things that might be useful.
Is it an organization that is organizing those speed dating events?
Well, it was women corporate directors in another region, but as I said, I think there's enough groups here that maybe we could put our heads together and come up with a variation if people are interested to do something like that here in the Valley.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. I don't know about you all. I learned so much. I am so inspired. Let's thank Amy Hillman and Shirley Weis. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Oksana Komrnitzy for some closing remarks.
Couple of things. On behalf of Elevate, Take the Lead, and all the women in this room, and all who intend to take the seats on the board in the future, I want to thank all three of you. The advice, the expertise, and the stories that you shared with us today will undoubtedly influence all of us as we plan to take our next steps toward a goal of becoming a director in a publicly held company. And we ask that you please accept these small gifts, a token of our appreciation. It is the wonderful book, Women and Transition, Reinventing Life and Work by Linda Rosati. So thank you both very much. Please join me in a round of applause. Also, I want everyone to know that despite titles of co-chairs, this event today would not be of the caliber that it was without the drive and the effort and the brilliance of Mara. And I personally want to thank Mara for the tremendous amount I've learned from her over the past 3 months in putting this together. And I want to thank her on behalf of all of us for this spectacular event. Mara, thank you. Mara is simply amazing. There's nothing else I can say. Prepare to leave today, I ask you to do two things. First, fill out that blue sheet and leave it on the table so we know what you're interested in on a going forward basis with our February 29th event. I also ask you to take the centerpieces that you have here. Oftentimes people are hesitant to walk out with it, but I'm going to tell you, think of it this way. Take your place at the board seat. Just take it. It's yours. Also, we have 2 more books here that we are raffling off, so if you'll bear with me, very secretive ballot. And it is Lori Battaglia with Living the Dream. Lori? We truly appreciate all of you being here today. We ask you to reach out to each other We ask you to look at networks such as Elevate and take the lead and participate in these organizations. And we ask you to make sure you're all here next year. Thank you very much.